My name is Mark Williams. I'm the Executive Director of TAMS, and I would like to welcome you to today's Taking Off with TAMS, Navigating Non-Employee Travel. Today's event is brought to us by Zeno by Serco. Zeno and Serco are founding partners of TAMS, which is very important to the organization. So I want to, right here at the start, thank Serco for their sponsorship as a founding partner of the organization. Before we get started, there are, excuse me, a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. Chat is enabled and encouraged for comments. If you have questions, please place those in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring those and getting them to our facilitator today, which is Mike Daly. And note that the session is being recorded. With that, let's go ahead and get started. I do want to introduce Mike Daly. I think most people, probably all of you, know Mike. And so without any further ado, I'm going to turn it on over to Mike, introduce himself, and introduce his panelists. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. It's absolutely great to be here. Super excited about presenting alongside you and our esteemed panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment. But before we dive into the discussion, I just wanted to set the stage a little bit about what's going on in travel and expense. There's been a ton of activity lately, especially around the technology sector. But today we're going to talk specifically about non-employee travel, which seems to be on the rise and picking up a lot of momentum. But before we get into that, let's talk about innovation in general around travel and expense. I think most of you would agree that it has somewhat stagnated, right? We've got a fragmented ecosystem that has really been exacerbated by NDC. And when you think about the industry and the numerous stakeholders, airlines, hotels, car rental companies, TMCs, technology providers, payment processors, and then, of course, what drives the whole ecosystem are the corporate buyers, right? The corporate clients. And coordination of all these disparate entities and integrating all these systems to deliver a unified, innovative solution or a unified travel experience is really inherently complex. So that fragmentation, I think, leads to a lot of that stagnation. And when we think about where we're at in terms of bookings that are made within program, we'll start on that side, on the booking side of the house. The latest stats I saw, that 1 in 4 airline tickets are booked outside of program today. So that's up considerably from where we were pre and during the pandemic. Close to 60% of hotels are now being booked outside of program as well. And I think the number was about 34% for car rental. So if you think about the forecast of $1.4 trillion in corporate travel spend in 2024, that's a lot of money being spent outside of program. I think it's about 95 billion for airline tickets, and it's about 400 billion for hotel spend. So that's a lot of spend being or not being captured because it's not going through the program properly. The other thing that I think is driving some of this stagnation is just a general resistance to change, right? I think change for every industry is very tough because many businesses, and in particular in our industry, travelers, are accustomed to traditional ways of doing things, traditional processes, systems for managing their T&E today. So there's typically a reluctance to adopt new technologies, and people tend to move away from disruption due to implementation costs, perceived complexities, and other issues that come up along the way. When we start to look at non-employee travel in particular, which typically represents about 10 to 15% of a company's spend, the costs are even higher, right? Because the majority of the processes from booking to reimbursement are manual. So we still need to address this segment, and we need to look at ways to bring some automation to this segment to drive policy, to drive compliance, to leverage negotiated rates and preferred vendors. And of course, there's some implications in there in duty of care. But I think most of all, we want to drive costs out of this process because it's very costly to do business this way. So why is it important? Let's look specifically at candidate travel. Coming out of the pandemic, there was some statistics that I picked off of LinkedIn last year that showed that 70% of human resources execs believe that automation would increase productivity, specifically when talking about the process and travel in particular. We also noted that 93% of businesses are actively hiring right now. So clearly, this is a big deal. Companies are bringing more and more employees, or candidates, I should say, into the interview process. And I think what's most important about this is 78% of job seekers are looking to this experience, this interview process, with how they value a company, or how they determine who they're going to work for. So if you think about that interview process, if you have an automated, seamless experience and you're reimbursed in a matter of days, that's probably going to weigh a little bit better on your decision-making process than if you had to book over the phone, if there were some issues that arose during travel and you had to wait on hold with a supplier or with an agent, and then you didn't get reimbursed. I've heard up to 6 months with some companies that do manual reimbursements because of the purchase order and the invoicing process. But all is not lost. Let's take a look at some ways that we can get your HR teams out of playing travel agent and back on focusing what they were hired to do, right? Was to win candidates and bring employees, top-notch employees into your firms to drive your valuations up and drive your stock prices up. As you all know, there was a company that was focused on this pre-pandemic, and I think for the most part did a really good job, and their customers would say so as well, called PANA, and they were driving the candidate booking and reimbursement process, and they were driving a lot of costs out of the equation. Some of the statistics that we've seen from their business, they were since acquired by Coupa during the pandemic, and they no longer participate in this segment of the business. But the average cost of processing a guest reimbursement was $353. And again, that's the average. I've seen costs as high as $2,000 per purchase order, because as a non-employee, you can't really use your official expense reporting system. So let's find out from a couple of industry experts what you can do about this manual process that you might be utilizing today, and more importantly, the exorbitant costs that are associated with these processes. So I'm super excited to have a couple of friends with me today, Martha Ferguson, as well as Kristen Reeves. Martha is the Director of Global Travel Services at Lazard. And Kristen is the Global Commodity Manager, Travel, Group Meetings, and Corporate Card Programs at MKS Instruments. Before we dive into the discussion, I do want to let you guys know, as Mark had initially said, please pop questions into the Q&A, as we would like to make this discussion very interactive while making it as valuable as possible to you in the audience. So ask the questions that you want to find out about. We encourage comments, concerns, jokes are always well received as well. So hopefully we'll have a great discussion and look forward to talking about this ever-growing important topic. So I'm going to start with you, Martha. And let's start with asking, which category of non-employee travel is the biggest area of spend for you to manage? And I bring that up because there could be different categories, right? There's candidates, there's interns, there's contractors, there's VIPs, board members, et cetera. So let's start with hearing a little bit about what you're focused on today from a non-employee standpoint.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So I think for us, it's campus recruiting, and in a combination of campus recruiting. And what I mean by campus recruiting is we're spending a lot of time in the beginning of the year going out to various different universities and schools to look for our new class of analysts and associates. And that takes a lot of time. In the middle of doing that, we're also running within universities, we're doing diversity days and what we call sophomore days, where we're inviting sophomore university women students to come to one of our offices at whichever city that we've chosen.
Yeah.
And we do several cities throughout the first couple of months of the year to let them understand what a day in the life of working at Lazard and being a woman in banking is all about. And so, as you can probably understand, what the challenge there is, these university students and business school students are not only vying for positions at our firm, they're also being touted by other companies as well. So one of the big challenges for us is we have a lot of last minute changes because we hire for our incoming classes anywhere between 50 and 100 new students every year. And then we take them through a 6-week rigorous training class that they literally, it's called a training class before they go onto their desks. But in the middle of setting this up, again, my point there is what I mentioned earlier is these students are also looking at other companies. So we might find out at the last minute that somebody changed their mind and they went somewhere else. So then we have another slot to fill. So we have to find somebody else. And same thing with these 1 or 2 day diversity and women day events. We're getting constant turnover because somebody's decided they can't go. We've even had professors at colleges pull back and say, I can't let you have this person for this day. So then we have to fill that slot with somebody else, or we just don't invite somebody else. It doesn't really matter, but it just makes it challenging because it's an ever-changing environment.
Yeah. And it would sound like too, you've got, let's see, sophomores, 19, 20-year-old women flying to
Yeah.
cities you may not have ever been before. I would imagine booking the right hotels would probably be a big concern.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly want them close to the office, like you said. Usually, especially in New York and San Francisco and cities where we want them to be safe. We need them to be close to the offices, and it's also a hotel that has to work with us very flexibly because, again, at the last minute, we're doing name changes. We don't even the frustration on my part is they don't even send invitations out to these events until 2 weeks prior to the event. Meanwhile, well into 2 weeks prior to the event, the hotels are demanding rooming lists. So we even have to choose a hotel based on how easy you're going to work with us, because the day before the event, we're swapping out somebody's name.
Yeah. I know those hotels in New York are super cheap, like October, November, December, right?
Yeah,
Especially last minute.
right.
How about you, Kristen? What types of categories are primary concern for you?
I think here at MKS, really our primary is candidate travel, right? I mean, it's a super competitive hiring process, kind of as Martha alluded to, and um, you know, it really is their first look at what MKS does, how we operate, right? So we work closely with our recruiting teams to make sure that the candidate travel experience is smooth. Now, maybe underwater, we're running around doing things, but we want to make sure that when it's candidate facing, that they experience the best. It has been challenging. Certainly at MKS, we didn't have a process prior to this, so kind of building that from scratch has been important. The other issue is, in that hiring process, HR is really not allowed to ask for date of birth, gender, those kinds of things. So creating a process, obviously those things are needed to book travel. So kind of creating that process so that we can get that information to the travel agent in a safe and secure manner without it being accessible by our HR recruiting team.
Yeah, no doubt. I've heard that come up before with the date of birth where people kind of look the other way when it's done just for the, I
Hmm.
guess, sake of efficiency. But yeah, it's against the law, I think, right?
At least in some states it is. So
Yeah.
it's very important. Plus, MKS is, I'm sure, like other companies, but is super sensitive about having data, private information, and those kinds of things. So we wouldn't really be able to have date of birth hanging around.
Gotcha. When you were building the process from scratch, what was or what were the biggest pain points in your experience?
Um, Getting all of the recruiters on board again, sitting down, talking about they were having issues with, um, as you mentioned, they're not travel agents, right? So they were doing a lot of research on the online booking tool or on the web and trying to, figure this out. They don't know, what airport is closest to the candidate's house,
Sure.
those kinds of things. So, I think kind of helping them understand we're going to just take that away from you, right? That's not your core competency, and kind of building that process. Working again with our travel agency, they set up a separate inbox for them to go to, created a form for them. So, but it really has been that, helping them understand they don't have to be a travel agent, and then the billing's always, you know, an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Martha? What were some of the bigger pain points that you faced when you were addressing this area of spend?
It's a lot of what Kristen already said. I mean, when I first started this process, when I joined Lazard 7 years ago, it was so unmanaged that I was shocked. It was to the point where they were just giving out our TMC's contact information, telling the candidates to call in, book your
Figure it out.
tickets. These are unprofiled travelers. These are people that don't necessarily book travel, maybe all that much. We weren't even putting everybody in the same hotel. So I really had to work hard to convince everybody what was the best process to do. So like Kristen said, our TMC, we had high expectations from them to put a form together. We built a shell profile called recruit travel or campus travel or C-suite, whatever it was. But you still have to gather that personal information from the traveler. So then the challenge on that side is it's extensive phone calls. You can't book on the booking tool because these are unprofiled travelers. And the other challenge is the resources of my HR team. This is a lot of time for them. And they're so busy. I mean, we've got a team of probably 7 people that do nothing but campus recruiting and diversity and women days all year long. And on top of that, it's the events that go along with it, because especially for the classes that are here for 6 weeks, we're doing all sorts of events around the city with them throughout their training classes. So it's just a lot of work, and it pulls and on the TMC side, it pulls the agents away from the normal everyday Lazard business travels. So hold times go up. So, you have to balance all of that.
Mike, we do have a question that's popped up.
Yeah, let's jump in. Go ahead and read it, and let's see if both Martha and Kristen can answer.
Okay, this individual doesn't have a problem with booking, but they do have an issue on the expense side. And their expense tool has a candidate function, so they can make payments, but they have to enter their expense report into the system on behalf of the candidate. The big issue comes in getting the receipts in the proper data format and having them fill out a form. That's the challenge. And this individual is wondering whether the group has any thoughts.
I don't use that. We centrally bill almost all expenses, from their Uber, Lyft, their hotel. We use third-party credit card authorizations or Confirma. We centrally bill their airfare. So really we take care of all their meals. There's very little. We try to take care of parking, everything that you can think of. We try to make sure is centrally billed, because the idea of processing an expense report is painful. So
So, Kristen, on the meals, do you provide them meals when they're at the office? So
we
you encourage them
use,
going out and buying their own.
yeah. So if let's say we have to fly them in the night before, we will give them Uber Eats vouchers, right? So they can have anything delivered to their hotel room. So that takes care of kind of their meals. We'll feed them obviously when they're here in our offices. We take care of car service or Uber service to and from the airports. both at their home airport and at, our office airports. So we really try to ensure that there's no out-of-pocket expenses whatsoever for our candidates.
I
Now,
think,
since
Mike,
you
I
said
think,
Uber Eats, I'm guessing I'm going to get a bunch of Uber Eats ads on my phone the rest of the day. Thank you
I
for that.
know, so sorry. I mean, I'm not necessarily promoting them. It's just,
I'm
it's a
kidding. I'm
tool that
kidding.
we use.
No,
So,
that's
Mike,
great. That's actually that's pretty
hmm.
slick how you guys do that. How about you, Martha?
Yeah, we're very similar. We have a meeting card that we central bill all the hotel, and it's hotel tax and incidentals if somebody has to come in the night before. But we also, if they're in the night before and they're in our office, we have a seamless account so they can order just like our regular employees do for late night meals. Airfare is also centrally billed to one card, and these two different meeting cards both flow through our expense system. So it's become much easier than it was. It's a lot of work in reconciling because again, we're flying in 30, 40 people into one city, but it's just going on one central card. So
yeah.
we've come a long way.
I guess in a lot of respects, Mike, it boils down to maybe tips and mileage if they have mileage. If you centrally do everything else, there's
Mhm.
still, not every time, but sometimes there's still going to be a few dollars out there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things, speaking of tips that we do is we give everybody, and not even just our campus recruiting, even if we've got senior candidates coming in, we offer them lift passes to and from the airports, and we build in because now you can add tipping to these
Yes.
lift passes. So really, I mean, it's to the point where unless somebody's going to buy a pack of gum or a soda or something at an airport, they're not putting any money out to come to our offices.
And Kristen, just a follow-up that's come through is what about receipts in case there's an IRS or other audit? How do you grab the receipts when all these things are centrally billed?
Electronic receipts come through for us, right? So I get the folios from the hotels. I have
Right.
all of the air, through Uber Eats and Uber for Business. I have, we also have a Lyft account, so I don't want to say we don't have that either. But
Now I'm going to get
you
Lyft
know,
ads too. Holy smokes.
anyways, so
That's
yeah,
great.
they all come through electronically, and so we attach those to the reconciliation. So the talent acquisition crew, we have one central card as well, and so they just go in on a daily basis and allocate to the appropriate cost centers.
Yeah,
That's
we do the
interesting.
same. And that brings back the point of how hard this is for our HR teams because there's so much manual behind the scenes work being done, gathering all those folios. So the more automated we can come up with a process, the better.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Yeah, the question talked a little bit about receipt capture and how difficult that is. And if I know the first slide I have was a bit jumbled, there was a lot of information there. But one of the things that we're seeing, even with automated expense, there's still about a $68 productivity cost within submitting an expense report. And that's due primarily to receipt capture. So OCR captures the receipt, but sometimes it converts it inaccurately. So people have to go back in and correct it, whether that's on the traveler side, the approver side, or even in AP. So that's interesting. The other thing I will tell you from experience is that I think there's two sides to the coin here. One, when they do have an expense, I don't think there's any way to avoid. You're just going to have to do a purchase order, and create that invoice when you do have to reimburse. But one thing that we've seen a couple of clients do is they just do the prepaid cards. So you have, let's say it's $100 per diem for those incidentals. You're there for 2 days. You get a credit card in the mail. I'm not going to mention the name of the credit card because then we'll get ads for that. But let's say you're there for 2 days, you get $200 on a prepaid card. It's an expense. It's off the books. Use it, don't use it. It's the candidates for their, for their consumption. One final stat that we've seen, then we'll get back into the discussion, is that 1/3 of expenses that are eligible don't get submitted by candidates. So if I'm interviewing, let's say with Lazard, and I go up to New York and everything's taken care of, but I wind up, hey, I'm hungry. I want to get a slice of pizza at, after dinner for a little snack. I won't expense that typically. So we're seeing that where I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna go through that process, to get reimbursed for $10 or so.
Mike, we've had one more question.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, they'd like to know if anybody has used an app like Navin. And one comment that I think, well, you said to put humor into it wherever you can. Bob Levine from BLS has said he has never heard of Uber.
I was
Of
waiting
course,
for Bob to
Bobby.
chime in. As soon as I said those 4 letters, I'm like, oh boy, Bob's coming for me.
All right, who wants to take that one?
I've never used it.
Yeah, we've never used that app either.
And I think it's Navan. They would
Navan.
correct, Ariel would correct you, Mark, because you didn't say Navan.
Sorry, I stand corrected.
And I hope Ron Glickman's on the call so he can do some impersonations for us to close it out. All right, any other questions coming in? All right, cool. Then let's talk about the future, right? So you guys have done I think a great job with the tools that you have in making the process as smooth as possible and taking work off of your recruiters' plates. But there's probably some more that we can do. If you had a wish list for the perfect solution, what would that encompass from start to finish? And I'll start with you, Kristen.
And I know that this exists in some forms, but really having more of an a more customizable online solution, whereby it takes our form. The way our form works today is my recruiters complete all of the information at the top, kind of like the cost center that's being charged, the dates of arrival, or the times of the meeting, etc. And then they send that to the traveler, who then provides all of their personal information to the TMC. I'd love to see that kind of online, and then have it follow through to the expense, kind of pulling through those transactions and allocating them. And it really just requires a final review by the talent acquisition recruiter. I'd love
Awesome.
that.
How about you, Martha? No, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I'm looking for automation. You mentioned PANA. We started talking with PANA back in 2020, and then the pandemic hit. We put it on hold. Then they were, absorbed by Coupa, and so we're back on this path, which is why, Mike, you and I have been talking. Right now, today, what we have to do is we have to send our TMC a list of everybody that will potentially be calling in. We send a memo out to all the travelers, and the back and forth that happens, whether it's phone calls between the TMC and the potential candidate, and then if there's something where they have to do something a little bit ad hoc onto the trip, it needs approval. And is this allowed? Is that allowed? Sometimes it even has to come to me. There's just a lot of working parts that go into this. And we're stretched thin within our HR department. I'll be honest with you, we've got so many things going on. So my goal is to bring that automation in so we can push a tool out to the candidates, and there'll be all sorts of limitations, whether it's, you have to buy a non-refundable ticket. We never force our employees to take connecting flights if it's, just because it might be cheaper. We aren't going to do that to our candidates either. And a lot of times, other than the 6-week training class, we're bringing people in for 1 or 2 days, so they don't have that kind of time. So a pre-approval process that's automated that could kick out, whether it's to my department, which, well, I am my department. I'm a department of one, so I'm not trying to add to my workload, but I'm also trying to ease the workload of my TMC partner, because they work really hard at helping us do this. It's very outside of the box for them. And, just sending a list of names and then them having to manage, okay, yes, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. It's a lot of work. So if we build in all the rules and the restrictions into a tool, then we're giving that power to the candidate. Let them go online like a booking tool, just like they would do for any personal reservation they might have, and ease the process.
Excellent.
Amen.
Excellent. Mark, I saw some questions come in, or were those just
Yes, we
comments?
do. We have another question. What about using the sponsored guest features in Concur?
Yeah, you guys are both Concur customers, right?
Correct.
All right, so
You
great
know,
question.
for me, the problem with the guest functionality is that I need somebody in my company to manage all these reservations, and it's not taking the workload away from them, because we would have to have somebody full-time making non-employee bookings on Concur. And that's a lot to ask, resource-wise.
Yeah. And let's be real, it's more cha-ching, ching, ching, right? It's another module that I have to buy. And we're just not looking to add cost, right?
Right.
So that's why we
And
haven't.
process. You know,
Yeah.
if I have a resource making all these bookings as guest functionality on Concur, it doesn't take away all the back and forth. Is this flight okay? Is this flight okay? Do you want, you know what I mean? Like, what are your airline preferences? Who is your frequent flyer? It's still a lot. I don't see that cutting down the workload.
I think sponsored guest is a little bit different than traditional guest bookings. I'm not super familiar with it, but I think it is something that you can send out to them, putting parameters on it. But it still is not touchless, and it still involves more work and money.
And Mike, we have another one. What attracts you more to Uber and Lyft for ground over traditional services if they can offer the same portal for booking?
That didn't come from Bob Levine, did it?
It says anonymous attendee.
He signed
We
in
use-
twice.
we do use both. But some of our, they're just very savvy, and so they prefer that. So that's from our perspective.
Yeah, and we use both as well. I've got Executive Ground, I've got Black Car, and we've got Uber and Lyft. The attraction of the Lyft passes was because it's not only just airport. We're doing events. We're letting people go out to Yankee Stadium, and you know what?
What? Whoa, slow down. How do I get in that?
Yeah, I know. I'd like to be a candidate. No, and these passes are really good because the recruiting team can just go online and they can literally create a pass for one specific event, whether we have to get them downtown, whether we have to get them out to Yankee Stadium. Yeah, is it convenient rather than taking subways? But subways bring a different sort of duty of care concern, especially for people that really don't know New York City that well. So we're sort of all over the board with that.
Gotcha. Mark, anything else in the chat or Q&A?
Yeah, we do have a couple of comments. One from Bobby Huber at Cornerstone. She's not in sales, so we'll say this is not crossing the line, but she does state that they have an automated pre-approval system with an emphasis on the automated part. So she wants to just that there's options available. I do think going back to the Bob Levine show here, we have a comment from somebody that I'm sure wants to maintain their anonymity. So for purposes of this, we'll just call this person Colleen Kearney, who says, "What's BLS?" She's never heard of Bob Levine. I thought that was a good one.
That's awesome, Colleen.
That's funny.
So Bobby, you just mentioned having options. So I think as we start to wind this discussion down, without mentioning vendor names, what would no, it's fine. I don't want to make it a sales pitch for anybody. But what would you recommend? We'll start with Martha. What would you recommend one of your peers do to get started on this? Where do they start? Who do they talk to?
I mean, I think you have to look at the landscape, and you've got to talk to more than one supplier, because it depends on what your needs are, and determine that. Yeah, there's options with Concur. But if you don't want to work with Concur, even though we're a Concur customer, we want something that's independent. I'm pushing for pre-approval, but we're not a big approval company. There's not that much of an appetite, especially at a senior level, We let
Sure.
people, for the most part, do what they want. I'm just I think you have to outline your process, like we've talked about, find your pain points and figure out who's going to help you fix them the best.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Kristen?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think if you're starting, internally, you have those discussions with your recruiting, your talent acquisition team, and then engaging your TMC. I mean, sitting down and having these are my pain points, and having our TMC say, hey, here's some of the things that we can offer to do. So for us, that was a really good starting point. Once you get that foundation, then kind of moving on and looking at other opportunities from a technology perspective. I would follow the same path as Martha.
Mike, we
Awesome.
have one more, I think, very good question that's come in, and
Excellent.
it comes from travel safety and security guru, Kevin Coffey. He says, can
Kevin.
the panelists address how or if they address travel risk with these types of bookings? And if they do, share what you do, as well as any unique experiences, if you have any.
We are just as a company, early in our travel risk journey. We're just actually engaging with a provider. I will, have all of the candidate bookings go through that risk process once it's fully implemented. But in the interim, we rely on our TMC and their reporting, running all of these transactions through the travel management company, allows us to kind of watch what's going on. We treat them as we would any other traveler as it relates to safety and security. I don't even want to say this out loud, but knock on wood, we have not had any experiences with candidates or board travel, non-employee travel, that have caused a safety security issue.
Knocking on wood.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I feel the same way. We have had a couple of issues that I can't, go into, but to Kristen's point, if you're traveling on behalf of Lazard, whether you're an employee or not, your safety is important to us. And so by virtue of going through our dedicated TMC, then I have eyes on the ground to where everybody is, as does my HR department, as does even up to my CEO. So that's just our everyday duty of care. We are increasing our duty of care process. As a matter of fact, we're in the process of doing that now to focus more on extraction processes, which we don't necessarily have right now. It's one thing to talk about something that's happened and figure out who's there. And I've always been a proponent of saying, you know what, if something happens in London or Paris, it's not just about the travelers that are traveling into London and Paris. What about our employees that live in London and Paris, or whatever other city that's happening? Shame on us if we're not also monitoring where they might be. If something happens in the middle of a town, or there's some disaster, there could be an employee of ours. So we've got like a send now type of internal system where people can let us know that they're okay. But the extraction piece of it, I think we're probably a little bit late to the game, but it's more important now than it ever was. But again, at the end of the day, if you're booking through us for whatever reason, however, you're going to be looked after.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Matt, Mark, anything else coming in?
Nope, that covers what we've gotten, Mike.
Were there any questions about Shogun, the limited series on FX? I'm ready to discuss.
What else you got, Mike?
There's no
we
no
could talk
promotion.
about wrestling. We could talk about Batman, or of course we could talk about Yellowstone, whatever floats your boat. No, I just want to close by saying thank you, and really appreciate your time and your insights, Kristen and Martha. Thank you so much. Mark and Sherry behind the scenes, and Debbie behind the scenes, thanks for pulling this all together. Before we go, I will hand it off. Oh, wait, we've got Chris from Disney has a question. I think it just came in. Yeah. So let's go to that. Then I'll close it up, and I'll hand off to you, Mark, to provide some closing items.
Okay. Yeah, he wants to know what profile management tools they are using.
We're just using Concur via our HR feeds.
Yeah, I have an HR feed as well.
Got it. Hope that answers your question. And one other thing, Kristen and Martha, would you guys be open to taking questions in the future if they come into us or if people reach out to you? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. Mark, I'm going to hand off to you,
Okay.
and we'll get this sucker closed out. Everybody have a great weekend. And remember, the Masters practice rounds start on Monday. So if you're in the Augusta area, look me up.
Okay. Thanks, Mike, and thanks to both Martha and Kristen as well. I thought great job. So much appreciated. Thank you for your time and your work on this. A reminder, the session has been recorded, and the recording will be made available in the TAMS website, as well as we can send it out to those who registered for the session. Just a few reminders regarding TAMS Ignite. If you haven't heard, and hopefully you have, the TAMS Ignite will be the first in-person event for TAMS since its founding a few years ago. It will be held this coming Monday and Tuesday, April 8th and 9th at the Marriott Marquis in Atlanta. Registration is $299 for TAMS members and $358 for membership and registration for those who aren't members. It really is shaping up to be a great day. There will be interactive sessions, a keynote session from Danielle and Eric from PwC talking about what they've done. In the afternoon, there will be power talks on topical industry issues. And really important for the organization is that those who attend will also be involved in deciding what initiatives TAMS will take on in the next 12 months. So if you have registered, look forward to seeing you there on Monday and Tuesday. If you haven't, please consider doing so. We'd love to have you there and have you participate in a very interactive day. With that, we'll call it a final for this Taking Off with TAMS. Please look forward to receiving additional information on future Taking Off sessions with TAMS. And with that, we'll call it at the end of the session. Thanks.